Okay, here's a recent archaeological confirmation of something that we would probably associate with ancient Egypt, but it's not this time. In fact, this might get us to rethinking the dating on the Sphinx as we talked about, but we'll get into that here in a moment. You know, the Sphinx is of course associated with Egypt, but I've done a few videos that showed that there were quite a few cultures that had this same symbology of the lion all the way up through Europe, and anthropomorphic creatures that would have played the part of the same thing as the Sphinx does in Egypt. They've said a few times that there might be another Sphinx, and there was always stories of it. I wonder if this might be it, but it's a little bit of a ways away. For the ancient Sumerians and Iranians and people of the Fertile Crescent all had this symbology along with the Proto-Indo-Europeans. This is found up in Pakistan, which is a little different than Egypt. And this one that's found in Pakistan, it's been confirmed by geologists. What's strange about this is it's in a place in Pakistan, as I said, called Lalissa, and it's known as the Lion of Barisma. If you look at it, let me see if I can get a pointer here. You can probably tell that we have a facial out feature and a hair that's on top and an eyes and a nose and a mouth. It's associated with it, but it's well worn away and eroded real bad here. But you can see that there used to be something which a lot of people believe may have been an ancient lion and then turned into a person and a lion, much like the tale of the Sphinx, where it could have been Anubis, a dog-headed creature, or just a lion in the age of Leo. But they've dated this thing with geologists to 12,500 years ago, or 10,500 BC, and here comes that strange dating again. A lot of people have looked into the Sphinx and the erosion around it, and they said, you know, with the amount of rainfall, this just doesn't add up, and would have to be much older when there was rainfall around there. This same area over here, which is pretty much a desert, also has that same effect. People looked into it and pretty much dismissed it always as being a natural formation and one of those things like pareidolia, and you can see pictures in the clouds. But it kind of looks that way from both sides here too. You can see the sloping back that's on it, but strangely enough, it has a headband and everything that goes with it, but it's also sitting on a platform, and they notice that down in here, all of these columns and stuff, which we'll get a better look at here in a second, that are associated with this too. Geologists noticed as soon as they got up close to it that this was nowhere near a natural formation. It's pretty much old limestone, sandstone, and because of that being a weaker stone, it just eroded away extremely badly. Now, if we've looked at the hulk of the Sphinx, what you're looking at modern day is something that got fixed up with modern stones that are all curved and look all smooth and all brand new, but you can look at just a few years ago or decades ago and see that it was all eroded away and in pieces and just had lines all etched into it, much like the lines that you see up here and here of erosion that had gone on for so long a time. And you see that same effect here, and they have no problem confirming a 10,500 BC dating to this. One thing that you can see even from this far away, like you're looking at Mount Rushmore or something from this distance here, is that right over in here, what would be down on the shoulder of the arms that come out and make the two paws here, hopefully you can see it, but there are lines that are there. That's not natural at all. It's not natural undercutting. It's actually been chopped to look like a staircase for a reason, even though it's all eroded away. It's pretty crazy, but then finding something like this and saying, well, there's all these geologists who aren't stuck up their butt, like Egyptology has been stuck on this thing, and these people have no association with what goes with this. So they let loose geologists onto it, and they came up with a date that seems to be around the date that a lot of these people who are conspiracy theorists or whatever have come up with would have been the natural date for something like the Sphinx. Isn't that crazy? So it's sitting upon this tower down here that you start to see, and they notice that there's a lot of natural erosion, but also there are columns all in this in different places. And much like this one hill that's over here, which of course is a big square and trapezoid, pyramid shaped, strangely, could have been shaped by people in some way to make that happen. There was a hill back over here, but it had this lump and a chunk up on top of it and seemed to look probably naturally somewhat with pareidolia, like that it looked like a lion and the people turned it into these things. I don't even know the exact pointing line of it. Judging the sun from the photographs that I've been seeing of it, saying that this must be east and west and so on, it's not quite facing east, and it doesn't look like it's facing northeast or southeast in a right direction that would actually be with solstices or equinoxes either. So it may just be have been used for purposes of its look rather than everything that goes along with it. Again, this would be predating the Egyptian one by over 6,000 years, unless someone looked back into the Egyptian one and realized that it perhaps had been built of this age. So that is one thing that's exciting about this, is that it might get people to starting to really look and rationally think about the possibility that that had been already formed as it. You know, when you look at the Sphinx, and you get a good look at it, this is of course a regular representation, but when you're looking at it in a modern day, this is where they redid the paws on it, and you can tell that they're all these little bitty bricks, and it's all been brand new, redone and all smooth. But look at the amount of erosion that's all over in the shoulders and the chest and so on that goes on here, and around the side body and the hips. It's not evident on the face. And this crazy thing is that we know that it was buried up to its head for most of the time, even in the Egyptian tales. So how is it possible that the least eroded part is up on top? Well, a lot of people have realized, and you look at a real photo rather than this representation, and you can tell that right about in this mark here, it's a darker type stone, and it's been replaced and redone. Perhaps it eroded too much. In fact, this got eroded down to the point that whenever they redid it, now the head is too small for the body, and a lot of people also make that easy assessment of the way that it looks. It's like a cat with a little bitty head. Doesn't quite look right. Would only look right if it was larger, and so on. And so this, you know, the Egyptians, they had an incredibly rich society, and people say, well, they got their stuff from somewhere. Well, how far back does that go? How far back does the concept go? I mean, here you can almost see what I'm talking about, even though I caught it a blurry moment. Well, right at the bottom, well, it's actually off the bottom of the screen here. It really gets lighter right here at the very bottom and darker. Of course, in a modern day, they've cemented and fixed a lot of this and so on, so it doesn't erode anymore and all kinds of things, and have left it, you know, pretty much off. By the way, did you know that it used to be painted and that there's still remnants of the paint that's there? At one time, it was wearing earrings. but those are long gone. It used to have the big chin beard that was even attached to the point on its chest, but that broke off long ago due to erosion. So one would think, how long has that thing been sitting there and eroding as such? You know, you look at this thing head on and you kind of see it and you kind of don't now, but I still see it. But it has to have been extremely eroded over time, and they weren't able to do it like the Sphinx and try to get it right, where if it was lacking in anywhere, they could add some stones in there and try to make it right. Some of the first or earliest scrolls that we have talk about them repairing it, and a lot of people have said, why would they need to repair it if it had just been built so well just recently before that, like is what's told in the idea. That's not probably it, that it was a reparation or a rebuilding or a refacing, and at one point a reheading of the entire thing that's there. This, of course, doesn't seem like it could have had anything like that go on to it. What's crazy is right down here under that paw, which Casey talked about and all those other guys about there maybe being a hall of records, there is definitely a cave system right there. Wonder what is in there or what might have been in there at one time. Crazy to think about this idea here, but people have looked at it and realized that this is all not natural. In fact, a large amount of changing of the stone was done. Kind of like I mentioned in Mount Rushmore, where they kind of looked like he could see it right there. If he could blow off this one part and this other part, then here's Washington, here's this, here's that, there they all are. Just like you could look at something like this today and say, yeah, I could put a person's face right on the front of that right there. I mean, that'd be pretty easy, right? In a modern day, we could get some people working on these things, ropes and hanging down, just like in Rushmore, and probably get them to refix it back to really look like what maybe they think that it was before. I'm excited to see any other papers come out on this because, again, I wouldn't be reporting this if it wasn't reported to me as being professionals and a professional date that's pulled off on this. And then it correlated with a date that we talk about far too often, and that just seems quite strange. And then on top of it all, it might just redate the Sphinx and get people to start looking at something that just a few years ago they thought was hoo-ha. Like a lot of things we've talked about in my videos, they're all of a sudden showing up with their own wiki pages and everything. So, you know, there's all that erosion that is around on the body that they showed there. And you look at something like this, and there's a huge amount of erosion that's on it too. Now it's a little bit bigger, but still you can effectively see where it might have had a beard, where the lips, where the eye sockets, where everything is, and it does look a little like pareidolia, and I guess that's the reason people wrote it off. But again, they've gone and looked at this thing, and they've said not only was the stone in the face worked real well, and this done some through here and to help make sure that it looked like the arms and the paws, but look at these pillars that are right here clombed into it in a few places. And again, at one point here, all of this below it, they've got little columns in it too. It looks like it was done naturally somewhat, or picked out natural places to work it out, but we see that in the India temples and everything else. And again, this thing dates to 12,500 years ago. Quite strange. So what we see today in the Sphinx is them rebuilding it like what's shown right there. Here's a closer look at some of those collimatures that's all built up under there, under natural stratification, and it almost looked like they avoid the little weak bands where there's weak, good, weak, good, weak, good bands, and went for the area right below that. In fact, there's a perfect sectionated part where just a certain section below that, they ran below here and ran columns down, and then you can see it again over here where it's about the same amount, the same distance, column-looking things that they've done in this. But of course, if you take something that's limestone or even sandstone and do something like this and then give it 10,000 years in an area that becomes windblown with a desert, it gets to the point where you almost don't see it anymore at all, and you almost just want to write it off. Till somebody comes real close to it and looks, and they could tell that a lot of this rock that was all here and here down from it, and even down below, was done from them chipping and doing things, and this had been naturally worked long time ago. Isn't that crazy and amazing? So I think it's amazing, and if it comes out to be true, I want to have a secondary paper and everything on this, and then some people's names on it that I can refer to, and I will talk to you. And of course, this lion that we're talking about here might get his own wiki page soon, and then have that information attached to it, and then down below researchers and so on. And we'll try to touch upon this again. So one wonders how far back this concept goes of these things. And I've showed you in Proto-Europeans and stuff leading back to the last ice age and a little bit past, where they had this type thing going on with anthropomorphic creatures, especially associated with lions and things. And now we find something here which almost validates that, and it gives us a whole nother idea of a timeline for this whole concept that goes on. And again, I have to touch upon Gobekli Tepe. If that didn't come out and get totally validated, a lot of these other things would still be being scoffed off, and we'd waste another generation until one certain thing can be found. And a lot of times it just takes a certain artifact to be found to show you that something's wrong here, because this, well, it's a pretty big artifact here. Tell me what you think. Is that the Sphinx type erosion that's gone on? Peace.